to New Hampshire, to Atlanta, and then to this remote part of Louisiana. Her repeated requests to contact her lawyer were denied. What has happened to Romesa Auster is basic rights and a national disgrace. Romesa Auster is a Tufts University graduate writer and a member of the Somerville community who was here legally on a student visa. By all accounts, Ms. Auster is a respected member of the Tufts and Somerville community. Her professors have given her glowing reviews, describing her as, quote, compassionate, serviceable, and principled. She was peacefully walking to a university dinner when masked ICE agents surrounded her, refused to explain why she was being detained, and then forcibly removed to an undisclosed location from her perspective. The video of her arrest is the stuff of the nightmare. But thank goodness we have that video so that we can see in broad daylight this example of McCarthy-esque treatment of people in our country. And this is what the Trump administration is doing all across our nation on a daily basis. Why was she abducted? What was her crime? She has not been charged with a crime. The government does not have a single shred of evidence that she poses a danger to the community. She told us she was afraid and that she would be killed in a brutal way, and abducted her. They were rough with her. They moved her from handcuffs to chains while they were transporting her. They kept asking her if her name was Romesa, and she was too afraid to tell her the answer. She would not even eat the food which was offered because she was afraid that that food would be poisoned. That was how afraid Romesa was. Trump's America, her so-called crime was writing an ad in the Tufts Daily News, criticizing her university's response to resolutions that the Tufts Community Union Senate passed. Immigration enforcement. This is stifling dissent. This is repression. This is authoritarianism in the Trump era, and Romesa is the victim of it. Whether you agree with what Romesa Auster or not, when a government imprisons writers for their words, when it abandons legal norms, including due process for political conveners, when it floats oppression in the language of national security, then we must call out that injustice loudly. And that is what we did in Louisiana. That is what we are doing here today. The case is part of a disturbing trend by the Trump administration. Quick move them out of state to bypass judicial oversight, and then ship them thousands of miles away to a cell in Louisiana. Just to get to that ICE facility takes hours from the airport in New Orleans after you land. That's how isolated it is. But that is by design. And then she's taken to a for-profit prison that does not provide adequate health care or nutrition or even blood for the women inside of that facility. They make more money the more that they compromise the dignity of these women. We were told that this is a torture place and not a detention place by people inside of the facility. The Trump administration is deliberately forum shopping, trying to move it to Louisiana, to the Fifth Circuit, the most conservative circuit court in the United States of America. So that's all part of Trump's larger effort to squash dissent within our nation. People are being held in prison for more than a year with no charges being brought against them. More than a year. This is unconstitutional, illegal, We are in the United States of America, not Russia or Belarus. This is not acceptable. If you have committed a crime, you must be charged, and the evidence must be presented. Happening for Romesa, but it is not happening for most of the other prisoners in that detention center. Trump is arresting people, including Romesa, because he refuses to recognize their constitutionally protected rights. And what we learned was that there were almost 1,000 women in this facility, and Romesa told us that many of these women cry themselves to sleep at night, worrying that they are forgotten people. That is how desperate people who are in prison are right now. Their humanity is being every single day that they are being held in this facility. For Romesa, she had a right to free expression, and instead of equal protection under the law, under a Trump, there is no protection if you disagree with it. Trump is doing overtime to silence dissent, terrorize immigrant communities, and dismantle the rule. It is outrageous. It is unconstitutional. It is un-American, and we are fighting back. This case is not just about Ms. Auster. It's about all of us, including Mahmoud Khalil, who we also met, and he told us that it's so bad that even though his son had been brought on the day before we arrived, that he was not given permission by ICE. He, just for a day to go to meet with his wife and the newborn son. That is how bad it is now. So you can abduct neighbors, pass agents, and secret them away, then this is something that must be fought. And Romesa is suffering, as anyone would in this circumstance, because of that unconstitutional action. Freedom of speech and the right to due process are not suggestions in our country. Free speech is a fundamental right. Due process is a fundamental right. Amendment, right of free speech, is not expendable. The Fifth Amendment protection of due process is not bendable. These are indispensable rights that all Americans enjoy, and we are celebrating this week the 250th anniversary of people in Boston rising up to enshrine these rights in the United States Constitution. And without a robust right to speak freely, without fear of retribution or reprisal, our most basic freedoms are just. And that is why we are calling on the Department of Homeland Security, release Romesa Auster, drop any proceedings against her, launch an investigation into the abuses at this detention center in Boston, Louisiana. And we urge our Republican colleagues to finally stand up to Trump and his compromise of the Constitution of the United States. And urge every American to understand the Constitution is only as strong as we are willing to fight to defend it. That is what we are standing for here today. The constitutional rights that are being compromised in our country. History is going to remember where each of us stood in this moment. Whether you agree with Romesa Auster said, we must agree with her to say it. We choose to stand with Romesa Auster and the rights we all share, and with the democratic America that we all still believe in. So it was my great honor to travel to Louisiana, these detention facilities with leaders. Congresswoman Ivey is the congresswoman from Somerville. Romesa is her constituents, and she brought truth to power. Every we were in Louisiana, it's my privilege to introduce the great Congresswoman Ayanna Preston.
Thank you all for being here today. Indeed, it was an honor to join my partners, Senator Markey, Congressman McGovern, on this this important congressional delegation. It was an honor, and it was also our responsibility. It was essential that we go not only to conduct oversight, but to bear witness. Yesterday, we visited Louisiana to conduct oversight of 2 ICE detention facilities in Gia and Brazil, where Mahmoud Khalil and my constituent, Romesa Auster, are currently being held. I know Romesa has become a symbol of the hurt and harm of the Trump administration. But she is a person. She is a person and a brilliant scholar, a woman who is a committed community member, one who is making meaningful contributions to public life and academia in Massachusetts. She has asthma, and thankfully she has not received the adequate medical attention that she needs. Romesa has not committed any crime. She was abducted, kidnapped by daylight, simply for authoring an op-ed that this White House didn't like. One that called for the dignity and humanity of every person to be respected. Detaining her serves no purpose other than to silence dissent, to stoke and instill fear, which is exactly what a dictator does. Similarly, Khalil has not been convicted of any crime. He was simply exercising his right to free speech, something that should be protected, not punished. And now, instead of being home with his wife and their newborn son, he is being unlawfully detained in a facility thousands of miles away, the community he belongs to. This is cruel, it is unjust, and it is unacceptable. We had the chance to meet with Romesa and Mahmoud during our visit to hear directly from them about their experiences and conditions inside these facilities. What we saw and heard was harrowing. It was heartbreaking, and it is enraging. Denied proper medical care, they are being deprived of sleep, they are not being fed nutritious meals. Romesa herself shared of having to wait 3 days, despite repeated requests simply for toilet paper. And you can't even get an extra blanket at night when you are cold. The cruelty is the point. The women that I met are mothers, daughters, sisters, wives, artists, teachers, activists. They are humiliated daily, degraded, and denied the basic necessity any human being. As I said, women there have a history of doing humanitarian work. Romesa amongst them. She's done humanitarian work with refugees, and she was shocked that this sort of facility even existed in the country that she has grown to love. That this could exist in America, the country she loves dearly and is given so much to. Mahmoud, who has lived in Syria under Assad, exactly what authoritarianism looks like, and offered that is exactly what we are seeing in this moment. This is authoritarianism in Donald Trump's America. Despite these horrific experiences, what stood out to me the most about each of them is that their first concern, in fact, their first priority, was not to make appeal for their own respective cases and unique and extreme circumstances, but instead, they put their own well-being and uncertainty of their future to the side to advocate for those that are detained with them. It was the compassion that they felt, that they walked with. Romesa came as someone who is a qualified researcher. She's been actively listening to with the women that she is confined with, their stories, and came with copious notes that she had collected. The stories she shared with us were stories of women being ripped away from their babies. Women with breast cancer who can't get the care that they need. Pregnant women denied prenatal care. When I asked her if anyone she knew had experienced abuse or assault, she told me she did not have the consent to share. What Romesa and Mahmoud are experiencing isn't an anomaly. There are hundreds of students just like them who've had their visas revoked, and there are millions of people being held in similar conditions in facilities across this country. These are private detention centers operated by a $1 billion corporation, launched to private prisons and profiting off of mass incarceration. Vigorous roles of these companies making money on disappearing. As someone who has visited several detention centers throughout my time in Congress, that this visit is not about optics. It is about accountability. It is about transparency. And it is about that no one in America, regardless of background, immigration status, political beliefs, and more, should have their constitutional free speech and due process ripped away. You know, some of the women, first I just have to say, part of the reason why dating is before we met with Lisa, we went to one of the dorms. And as the only woman in the delegation, when I entered, there were 15 women in the dorm, clad in sort of orange scrub outfits. And they just fell into, they were desperate and crying, fearful, and they kept asking, they kept saying, I want to talk to you, I want to tell you what's happening here, but will you protect us? When you leave, who will protect us? They were visibly shaking. We went to conduct real-time oversight. We went to witness. I feel a responsibility to carry the stories that I heard in my heart, and for that more my strategy and my advocacy. Yesterday was a physically and emotionally grueling and depleting day. And it has only strengthened each of our collective resolve to fight for Mahmoud, Romesa, and all that are there who question if God has forgotten about them. If the world has forgotten about them, we cannot. Today we're sending a clear message to Romesa, Mahmoud, and everyone who has been harmed or stands to be harmed by this cruel and callous White House, that we have not forgotten you. We see you, and we are fighting for you every day. And we're sending a message to Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and their Republican co-conspirators that Congress is watching, and we will not allow these agreements to go unchecked. I want to thank Ranking Member Thompson, House Homeland Security Committee, for organizing this trip, Troy Carter for hosting us, my friends and brother colleagues of the Massachusetts delegation, Senator Markey, Congressman McGovern, for showing up in solidarity and in strength. This is what it means to conduct real-time congressional oversight. There's no one, and so are we. We will leverage every avenue tool available to us. We will be exhausted. This is what it means to conduct real-time oversight. And this is the type of bold activist leadership moment demands. We must hold ICE and this hostile lawless administration accountable. We must protect our democracy, the fundamental rights of everyone who calls America home. And we must bring Romesa and Mahmoud home now. And with that, I'll bring to the podium my brother, colleague, Congressman Logan, nationally known for his work in human rights.
Well, first of all, let me thank my colleagues Diana and Ed on their courage and their commitment to these issues, especially surrounding. I appreciate their leadership. I appreciate them being born, because these are not ordinary. And we need a different type of leadership. They are showing us what that leadership looks like. Look, I am the co-chair of Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission in Congress. The commission is named after former Congressman Tom Lantos, the only Holocaust survivor to ever serve in the House of Representatives or in the Congress. And what is happening to Romesa and Mahmoud is a violation of their human rights. They are being targeted and imprisoned because of their political views. These are two people who are in this country legally. They are here legally and who have committed crimes. They are charged with offenses. They broke no laws. They are simply being held because the government doesn't like what they said or wrote. That is authoritarianism, plain and simple. And here is what Americans need to understand. This starts with Romesa and Mahmoud, but it ends with you. If the government can imprison people like them who dissent without due process in this instance, there is nothing to stop the government from going after you too. And that is unconstitutional, that is un-American, it is dangerous, and it is wrong. This is how people are treated in China, North Korea, Russia, and El Salvador. It's not how people are supposed to be treated in the United States of America. And what we have witnessed makes me wonder whether we as a country are losing not only humanity, but our values. The values this country is supposed to be built on. Freedom of speech, due process under the law, human rights, and human dignity. These are not just words. These are the ideas that we are supposed to live by. And they too are being denied to Romesa and Mahmoud. If this were happening in another country, our State Department would condemn it and call for their release. But it's happening here. And let's be honest about this. Mahmoud and Romesa are political prisoners. The bottom line is we cannot be complacent. We need to speak up, and we need to stand up for Romesa and Mahmoud, because if we do not, this will keep happening and to more and more people until there will be nobody left to speak up. Donald Trump wants to weaponize the government to go after people, say things he disagrees with, or writes things that he doesn't like. That is against everything we believe as Americans, everything. And if we don't speak up now, we will see more of this until our becomes unrecognizable to our kids and our grandkids. They will be afraid to speak out for fear that they too could be thrown in jail. Trump wants down that road. We cannot let him do that. This is a time for courage and acquiescence. These are not ordinary times, and it is up to all of us, not just those of us in Congress, but everybody to stand up and speak out and fight against this drift toward authoritarianism. Thank you.
Questions?
Secretary Rubio has said that Romesa and the not right, and that it's within the discretion to deport students who are causing a rough neck period of day it's a privilege not right, whether the government have that discretion.
Marco Rubio has a responsibility under the Constitution to present evidence, to present the documentation of a that has been committed by Romesa Auster, or by any of the people who are in these prisons. Marco Rubio does not have the right to, in any way, have people deported without due process, without accusation being made public. And that's essentially what both Romesa and Mahmoud are charged with. That when they got a chance to make the case publicly, the federal prosecutors refused to present the evidence. When Khalid lawyers challenged the decisions that were called to be rendered, there was no evidence presented by the government, even though there was clear and compelling evidence on Mahmoud Khalil's side on the case. No one, Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, or any American has the right to act in a way that truncates fundamental.
About real-time oversight, and I know Senator Mark, you also talked about speaking loudly and holding this press conference because you want people to know that this is wrong. But what concretely can you do? What tangible things can you do to make sure that they are removed from this prison and the things you're calling for happen?
Well, we're doing it. I mean, it's leveraging every tool available. There are, when it comes to the nearly 300 students who have unlawfully had their student visas revoked, there are active cases because what happened to them was unlawful. So there's litigation to get those visas reinstated. And I do believe that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and so we needed to shine a light. People, as I said, Romesa and the women that are in this facility with her, they are not just symbols of the egregious harms of this administration. These are women who belong to families, who belong to communities. I wanted to go and spend time with them and hear from them so that I could center their humanity, so that the people of this country could be made aware of their humanity, so that any person of conscience will give a damn about what's happening. I was not just there as a member of Congress. I was not just there as a member of the Oversight Committee. I was not just there because I'm Romesa's Congresswoman. I was there because I'm a human being who gives a damn about other human beings. This is unconscionable and unlawful. And I don't care what Secretary Rubio, Donald Trump, or any of them have to say, because they are rogue and reckless and unlawful. They don't know anything about the Constitution. They spend their days poking holes in it, and they're on their way to completely shredding it. And never in my lifetime have I experienced, this is a hostile White House in the midst of an active, hostile government takeover. They have contempt for every person that calls this country home, and no respect for the rule of law, and certainly not for the Constitution. They are godless and lawless. And so we are going to do everything. We're going to organize in the street. We will apply pressure. We may be, although we're in the minority, so we can't convene, hearings, but there are other things that we can do. We can do shadow hearings. We can continue to write op-eds. The main thing here is that they have disappeared people, and I need them to know that if the headlines fade, that our commitment to you will not wane. These are not hashtags. These are not compelling stories. These are people's lives. They have been disappeared from society, ripped away from their families. They have no idea. Listen, I talked about how grueling physically and emotionally this was, and we're sleep deprived. Look, I've been sleep deprived on the campaign, but I knew when it was going to end. I knew when it was going to end. These people are, but this is torture. They are being sleep deprived. They are being denied the basic essentials. Their humanity completely erased. And every person of conscience, this is not about Democrat or Republican. Right now, this is about right and wrong, good and evil. And people of conscience need to join us, apply pressure, continue to say their names, to demand their freedom, due process, justice, and to demand that Romesa's visa is reinstated. And finally, I just want to say, in meeting with Romesa, and I forgot to say that she's had her hijab removed as well by one of the nurses there. So religious accommodation not being honored, basic human needs not being met. She talked about a culture of intimidation where they often chide her for being an educated woman and a troublemaker. And yet, even in the face, in the midst of all of that, she is still doing her research. She is still advocating for the women alongside her. She is incredibly brave. And but when she was telling the story of her kidnapping, Senator Murphy spoke of the fact that when she was finally offered food, and this is after many, many hours, after being kidnapped and questions not being answered, being handcuffed, then being shackled. She said when they went to shift her from handcuffs to shackles, she thought, surely I'm going to die, and they're going to torture me before I'm killed. She had no idea what was happening, who these people were. She was simply on her way to an iftar, to a Ramadan, to break her fast. So she was ravenous and confused. In fact, she had recently been doxxed. And so when she was approached, she thought it was something to do with that doxing. But I do want to just end on something positive, because I asked her if she had a message for the people of Somerville. Romesa spoke of when she was put in the car in Somerville, when she was being kidnapped. Before they took her from Somerville to Lawrence, to New Hampshire, to Vermont, to Atlanta, and then to Louisiana. Before she repeatedly asked for legal counsel and was denied. Before she repeatedly asked for water and was denied. Before she repeatedly asked for answers and was denied. Before she repeatedly asked for a signed warrant. Before any of that, she looked up and saw that someone was recording. They were filming what was happening to her because she had screamed. And they put their hand on the window. And she said it gave her tremendous comfort, that she loves the community of Somerville, that even if you don't know your neighbor, you're never really a stranger, that people care about one another. And in that moment that she felt seen, and in a moment when she was fearing for her life, she felt cared for. And she said, I didn't know how much they had been able to capture, but it gave me comfort to know that someone cared, and that it was going to be seen by someone, and someone would be coming for me. Romesa, we are coming for you, and we will keep coming for you until you are free.
We went to the remotest parts of Louisiana as the Massachusetts Congressional delegation to put a spotlight on a facility so that other people who we represent are not sent to those facilities. Better us than them. That's the message that we receive. Better for us to be there, pointing out the inhumanity which these prisons represent. 9,000 people are being kept in these prisons in Louisiana. Most of them with no idea what the charges are against them.
That's right.
Most of them just absolutely being victimized by Donald Trump and his abject disregard for the United States Constitution that began right here with a battle on Lexington Green and Concord. So that's why we went. And on the floor of the House and Senate, we're going to be battling every single day throughout this entire budget process. Massachusetts is tough. Massachusetts is fighting. Harvard University is suing to protect all universities. Harvard University is going to win. Wilma Hale is suing Boston again, so that all law firms are not subject to this extortionary system of tribute which Trump is seeking to extract from law firms across our country. And the Massachusetts delegation went to Louisiana in order to make sure that the constitutional rights of everyone, including the least amongst us, are given the dignity, the protection of their humanity which they deserve. So that's what we're doing, and we're going to continue to do it until ultimately we are victorious.
Senator, are congressional Republicans paying attention to the spotlight that you're putting on? Because it would seem without their buy-in, true action would be difficult to stop.
We don't know where the breaking point is for Republican members of the House and Senate. All we can do is continue to point out to them that most of what Donald Trump is doing is unconstitutional and inhumane and an affront to the sensibilities of every thinking person in our country. Ultimately, I have confidence that there will be Republicans of conscience who will break with the president, that they will stand up against a president who wants to be an authoritarian dictator, a king in our country, who does not have any duty to protect the constitutional rights of every citizen in our nation, not just the rich, but everyone, right down to those who we met in that prison. So my hope is that ultimately there will be a break, that Trump will do something that is just so outrageous that ultimately they will break with this president and ultimately stand up for everything that America holds most dear, but at the heart of it is the United States Constitution, which is a guarantee of the rights of everyone.
Look, we all talk to our Republican colleagues on a regular basis, and let me just be frank, they're scared shitless of Donald Trump, of Elon Musk's money, but what's been happening over the past several weeks is that people are mobilizing, not only in Massachusetts, but all across the country. They're seeing this mass movement growing in opposition to the excesses of this administration. And guess what? They're starting to fear their constituents. They know what he's doing is wrong. They know that what's happening to Romesa and Mahmoud is wrong. I mean, many of them are personally very horrified by that. But they're too afraid to say anything. But you can see some cracks, and that's happening because of people power. I mean, we are talking to them, and I'd like to say that we're convincing them. I think that's part of it. But I think the fact that people are mobilizing and making it clear that they're not going to be silent while Trump tries to destroy our democracy, I think that is what's moving people. And so I agree with that. I think there will be a breaking point. And again, what we're talking about here today is not only about what's happening to those in these detention facilities. What we're talking about today is also about what could potentially happen to all of our constituents and to anybody in this country who dares to criticize this government. At risk is due process. At risk is whether or not you will be targeted and smeared because you don't get in line. We see that already happening. By the way, it's happening to the press as well. And so we all have to push back. This isn't about Democrat or Republican, as I have said. This is about our country and what kind of country we want to be.
And I would just Mahmoud, this was something that he reiterated over and over again, that this is laying the ground foundationally for every person's rights of free speech, constitutional rights of due process to be violated. And so if people are tempted to marginalize and other who this could happen to, again, in Donald Trump's America, this could be you. This could be you for suffering a miscarriage. This could be you for practicing diversity, equity, and inclusion. This could be you for reading a banned book. Donald Trump and his sycophants in this march for authoritarianism, what a dictator wants is to silence people, and they want a citizenry that is ignorant, which is why we have to reform them. They want a citizenry that is indifferent, and in that indifference, acquiesces and sees in this overwhelm that this view that they have for this country is an inevitability. So they want a citizenry that is ignorant, uninformed. They want a citizenry that is indifferent to what is happening around them and just sees it as an inevitability. And finally, a citizenry that is inactive. And so that is exactly why this fact-finding mission and the facts that we found out are alarming and damning, and it is acutely about Mahmoud and Romesa because those are some of the most high-profile cases. But it has implications for every single person who calls this country home.
Thank you all so much. Thanks for coming over.